E3 for 2018 is done and dusted, so this is our E3 recap episode of the Gaming Lovers podcast.
And you know what that means? We must start with an 8-minute instrumental to kick things off.
No.
Let's get ready.
Can we just play the intro music, please?
Pass my banjo, please.
No. The Gaming Lovers podcast with Brendo and Jem. What a week. My goodness. There has been a lot of highs and some lows and a lot of awkward moments, which we love.
I have gaming fatigue and I've barely played anything.
It has been an incredible week. There are a lot of games we are very, very excited for. We've already covered part of E3 in our last episode, so if you haven't already, make sure you listen to episode 7 of the Gaming Lovers podcast. And if you have and you're up to speed, we're going to touch on all the different conferences that we hadn't already covered, like PlayStation, Ubisoft, Nintendo, and everything in between, including a little bit of WWE versus New Japan.
Ooh.
Yes.
How did that ever happen at E3?
I know. So, lots to talk about.
As we start off, I made a prediction that the gaming world would rejoice for the Command & Conquer rivals. The next generation of Command & Conquer has arrived in mobile form, and I thought maybe the fans who are clamouring for some Command & Conquer would be happy. What's the current ratio of like to dislike on that YouTube video? It's pretty bad.
It is. It's not the game that fans wanted from the feedback, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad game. I think it's just not what they were hoping for. So,
yeah. Sorry.
That's always hard.
I was a bit off the mark on that one.
It's all good. We all make predictions or have wishes like Pokemon Snap. They just don't come to fruition.
You played that card very early in this episode.
I promised that. I thought I'd get it over and done with early, and then we can move forward.
Okay.
All right, so let's cover Ubisoft because usually they're kind of the guys that are known for having really awkward hosts. There was an actress who for years would be like their MC and would make the weirdest jokes and make everyone slightly uncomfortable. But they've gotten rid of her and they've moved forward.
They instead hosted it with a dancing animal.
Panda.
Was that correct? Is that how they kicked things off?
They didn't host it, but the panda definitely kicked it off, and we're like, what is going on? We're like, of course, this is Ubisoft. There's dancing panda, and then there's people with very Lady Gaga-esque outfits joining this panda. But it was actually really good because it tied in with Just Dance 2019, the game that's coming out next year. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's cool, that's clever that they've got this big dance. And I think they featured songs that they were going to include in the game that they were dancing to as kind of like a mashup. So that is clever marketing.
And it did not overstay its welcome, unlike certain other musical acts that we had over the course of E3.
Of all the live musical, well, I say live, I think there was only live right at the end. I think they pre-recorded most of the dance beforehand. But the live stuff on stage and the live band that they had were really fun to watch, and only there for a short amount of time. We'll get to them, but there were some really interesting live music bits, especially in the PlayStation press conference. Yeah.
I wasn't the only one who missed some of my shots. So what else did they hit on in the Ubisoft?
Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who've played the first one, Jade has come back and looks like she's going to be maybe the main villain.
Yes, she has returned.
Bit of a heel turn.
There are many talking animals. Speaking of dancing pandas, we had monkeys.
Tied in together nicely.
We had everything. Art style looks really cool.
Yeah, it was a really interesting demo, whether that's just a cinematic trailer that they showed us. I don't think they really showed us any gameplay. I think
Still,
that was
the best Afro-physics I've ever seen.
And tying in with that is the Space Monkey program, which has sparked a little bit of controversy since its announcement. Basically, what they're doing is tying together with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who you may remember from Third Rock from the Sun and many other movies and such, he has a website called Hit Record where people will create things and work together as a community to make projects and get them going.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're working together to allow people to create art content, radio stingers for this game, all sorts of things so that they can be in the game. And if their stuff is selected, they'll get paid for it.
Yeah, not complete artworks either.
Yeah.
It's like not an entire, design of a spaceship or things like that. Not entire songs.
You're not doing coding or anything, but you can contribute, even if you just do like a bass line and come up with a riff.
Mm-hmm.
If that's included and put together in a song that gets used even for like 10 seconds in the game, you'd get paid.
Now, the issue people are having with this is that they feel that, hey, you guys out there can do the work for us and we'll pick and choose what we want. And you're submitting all this work and getting nothing for it unless we pick it.
There's also the worry that game developers will start using this as a way to get cheap labour rather than paying professional developers to do their job, getting the industry's best. It's like this workaround that if this succeeds on a really big level, if they get enough from the fans for like minimal wage, if not less, then they can use this all the time instead of
hiring
paying people.
A proper art designer or a proper, studio band to perform the music. If you get some guy from Wyoming to do it in his garage.
Exactly right. And it's one of those things. Like, you kind of like it because it gives fans to feel like that they're part of the game and, like, they'll listen out. Like, if they get to do one of those radio stingers, they'll listen out to see if they hear their voice as they're playing. But if you're not included after pouring a lot of effort into it, I don't know, there's a lot of risk, I think, that comes with this sort of idea as well.
Yeah, well, having said that, you're in an industry where you audition for roles.
Yes.
You put in the effort, you put in the hours, you put in the time.
Yeah, and you don't get paid to audition.
Exactly. I see it more like that. You want to pitch, this is what my idea for a label on a milk jug might be. Mm-hmm. Here, what do you think? If you don't like it, that's fine.
The only issue is... now, the game has said that they've got a certain set amount of money, a certain budget that they've got for everything that's going to get split with however many people are selected to be included in this game. And, as a performer that works in this industry to an extent, you usually can negotiate, or you'll have a union, or you will have an agent that fights on your behalf to make sure you get paid fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they don't have that. This is kind of like... because it's people volunteering and they're agreeing to kind of do on-spec work, basically, where it's a speculative work. If they like it, then they'll get paid. But then there's no guarantee that what they'll get paid is really what that work is worth. So that's where there's controversy. So it's really interesting. And I wonder if it's going to be a good or bad thing in the long run.
Well, it wouldn't be an E3 without awkward moments and controversy now, would there?
No, especially from Ubisoft. One other one we really liked, because there was an Aussie guy included in this particular presentation who was quite funny.
Trials Rising.
Mm-hmm.
The new game in the Trials series, side-scrolling motorcycle puzzle ragdoll injury simulator.
So much ragdoll physics, so much fun to play.
The director, I believe, actually scooted down to the stage on a little dirt bike,
Yes.
Promptly fell over and knocked the entire podium over.
Yep, destroyed a TV.
Trials fashion.
It was pretty funny. And then they brought out an Aussie guy who was so good at playing Trials, like kind of like pro level.
Excuse me, address him by his proper title.
Oh, I apologise.
He is a professor, thank you very much.
Professor Fat Shady. You love the names people come up with for the internet, right?
Professor Fat Shady, who had become an expert at manipulating the physics in the Trials series to the point where he made his own series of tutorial videos to teach people how to master the Trials games.
University of Trials, if you want to look him up on YouTube.
And he actually caught the attention of the developers and they said, hey, would you like to design the tutorials for our next main game? That's so cool. Pretty awesome.
That is so cool. And he wasn't the only one. They asked quite a few other people in the community, the YouTubers or Twitch streamers and the like that were really passionate about the previous other Trials games and got them to come and be a part of this next one to help make sure that they had tested it and that it was all the little things that maybe they'd missed in previous games were taken care of, and that this would be the best one in the series yet was what they were going for. And there is a closed beta test which you can apply to be a part of if you really love the series, if you love Trials. You could be a part of that beta test, but you have to apply for it first. It's not anyone can do it. It's a limited number.
It's a closed beta.
Yeah.
Yep. Just as a side note, if I graduate from the University of Trials, can I put that on my resume?
I don't know. Do they give out diplomas?
I'll print one. I'll design one for the Space Monkey program. One of their big pillars for this E3 was The Division 2, sequel to a sort of open multiplayer sort of team-based society has gone down the sink.
It happens a lot in video games.
There were a surprising amount of post-apocalyptic games this E3. It's the new Zombie. That and Samurai.
Yes.
Seems everybody in their samurai dog is equipping their swords.
And soon we'll have a post-apocalyptic samurai game.
Why not? I'm sure the market is out there. The Division 2, they did one of those pretend live playthrough trailers
with voice actors.
4 players all communicating like they're actual soldiers. They did it for Rainbow Six Siege when they revealed that a few years ago, and it felt just as forced as this did.
Yeah.
Gameplay looked good. They've made some improvements on the formula, promising new specializations, and if you dug the first game, I'm pretty sure the second game will be right up your alley.
One thing that caught my attention, Rabbids and Donkey Kong, which is technically just DLC, with the Rabbids and Mario's
Kingdom Battle, yep.
Essentially XCOM, but with Mario and Rabbids skin.
And less heartbreak.
True.
XCOM is a rough game
Not
to
as
play.
brutal. Still hard, but not as brutal. So Donkey Kong is getting added to that, and that looks like a lot of fun.
Well, one of my highlights from all of E3, they had the composer for Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Yooka-Laylee, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Grant Kirkhope, and he conducted a live mini orchestra while the trailer played and synced up the music to the trailer perfectly.
See, there's another example of live music actually working in their favour. Ubisoft actually really succeeded in that area this year. Something other developers and studios could probably learn from for next year, guys. Just a hint.
One thing that was an issue repeatedly during this press conference, and occasionally in some others as well, we had microphones going live when they were not supposed to be live.
Yes.
One of the people walked off stage, thank you very much, walked off and said,
"We nailed it!" Hilarious. Because in that moment, then all their hard work kind of came undone. Well, probably not their fault, to be honest. That would be whoever's in control of the mics and making sure that they go off the second they go off stage was not doing their job, because we had so many people talking backstage through little snippets. We even heard a live stream feed. I think someone was talking in a different area because they had stages at E3 and sections where people were doing live demos of gaming in other areas. And so somehow another gaming stream feed where you have this host talking about the mechanics of a game, talking over a trailer of a game that they were showing at this showcase in Ubisoft. We're like, what's happening? There's 2 voices talking at once, and we're trying to figure out which one's the right one for this, until it went silent in the trailer, and then we still hear this guy talking about this other video game, and we're like, oh, you guys mocked up. You mocked up.
I understand live presentations are difficult to run without a single problem, but when it happens 3 or 4 times,
yeah, that's bad.
Someone should have picked it up the first time and said, hey, the audio is going through. Can we get on that?
That one, when it was going through that trailer, lasted like a minute. It was not just a short burst of, oh, whoops, turn that off. No, that went for ages, far too long. Should have been picked up so much faster.
Well, if you like pirates, they're also in vogue at the moment.
They are.
And using the naval combat from the Assassin's Creed series as a basis, we have Skull and Bones, which unlike Rare's Sea of Thieves, seems to be a far more realistic pirate simulator.
Yes. And the trailer kind of started off with, you betraying your friends and everyone out for themselves until this big dreadnought of a ship shows up and you've got to work together so you can survive.
Looked a little bit supernatural, didn't it?
It did a little, but that seems to be in theme with anything pirate-related these days.
Hey, you know who else showed up?
Who?
Elijah Wood.
Seems to be the year of just movie stars dabbling in video games, not just as actors but as creators.
Why was he there?
Promoting Transference. Which looks... I don't want to say it's like Heavy Rain or Beyond Two Souls, but it seems like it's a very cinematic game, like an interactive movie was kind of how they were describing it.
Well, it's sort of like a combination of things because it's going to come out for VR platforms as well.
Yeah.
You've got basically like an escape room sections, but inside people's brains. You're in their minds trying to solve their psychological issues and you're trying to help unlock their trauma? I don't know. It was one of those deliberately confusing trailers.
Yeah.
Apparently an abusive father involved, or he's very possessive at the very least.
So, an interesting game, one that's still, I think, because we don't know much information about it yet, one to kind of keep on the radar, but we're kind of like, I wonder if it'll be good. But it was interesting with Elijah Wood. I guess we presume that because they're actors that they'll be good public speakers on stage. But he got nervous and he probably had one of the biggest live fumbles on the Ubisoft stage out of anybody.
Except for the guy who actually took a physical fumble.
But that was much like WWE was scripted.
I don't understand the words you're saying don't make sense to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
Oh, goodness. Some exciting news. Starlink Battle for Atlas is going to have Star Fox as an exclusive, only on the Switch though.
Yes, after the last fumbled Star Fox game on the Wii U, Star Fox Zero, which was atrociously received by critics.
Yeah.
It's good to see that there seems to be a lot of cooperation between Ubisoft and Nintendo at the moment, which is good because what has held Nintendo consoles back in the past is they've been unfriendly to third-party developers.
Yeah.
Nintendo always make great Nintendo games, but they were not attractive to other developers because their consoles are either too weak, too weirdly complex with their controllers, or just, it just didn't fit their image. And they've opened that up, and now we've had Mario and Rabbids in what was a surprisingly great game.
Yeah.
You've got Starlink, which seems like it is exactly what No Man's Sky should have been. Space combat, exploration, scanning, new life forms. And then on the Switch version, you throw in Star Fox and his crew. It should be a winner.
I think that is going to be a big draw card for the Switch as well. So, I think it was really, really sweet because then they brought the creator of Star Fox,
Miyamoto-san.
Yes. And they gave him like this little statue replica of Star Fox's ship and also a little model of Star Fox as well, as you see him in this game, Starlink. And so that was just really sweet, I thought, as a way of thanking Nintendo and him for permission for putting him in the game.
Yeah, and as he received the little model of the R-Wing, he was grinning ear to ear.
He looked like a little kid.
Little bow. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. When he first saw it, he dropped a Sugoi, which is Japanese for, it's amazing.
So cool. Yeah. For Honor was back, and there is a Marching Fire update, and it is also going to be free for a little while on PC, I believe.
For Honor, very much a sword-based multiplayer game online, which is rare.
Yeah.
Especially in every multiplayer game seems to have guns, but very few have the melee up in your face sword and shield combinations. The new update featuring Chinese warriors.
Cool. It looked really good. The game, though, that I am the most excited from Ubisoft, and probably one of my top 5 from E3 altogether, Yeah. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier with the gift that I've just been obsessed with the guy getting
Laying the
kicked
boot in off the
getting
mountain.
kicked off. It just looks hilarious. I love it.
Well, now we found out why he was being kicked so far.
Mm-hmm. So it is set in Greece, and I love this. You can play as male or female, Alexius or Cassandra. I'm like, yes, I could be a female.
In previous games, I think Syndicate had 2 playable characters, but you sort of alternated between them as the narrative went on. The linear narrative went on.
And you've had was it on the Vita? That had the Aveline, yes, which was barely a blip on most people's radar as far as playing it, because not very few would have played the Vita version, I think.
Yeah. Assassin's Creed Liberation, it was called.
So,
but this one is a complete overhaul for a series that, to be honest, probably needs it. I mean, Origins, which was the last game, was well received, but I mean, how many entries has there been in the Assassin's Creed saga so far? And they, at one point, were pumping them out year after year after year.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll wear you down. And so they've completely changed this one up. You've got experience points. You level up.
Mm-hmm. It's more like an RPG, they said in the demos.
Yeah. You have dialogue choices that affect the game. You have romance options. And those are the 2 key words. Gets an into their little ears prick up. What's that? Romance options? Are there any aliens available?
It's an RPG. I can play as female and I can romance things. Yes, where do I sign?
Well, you won't have to wait long to sign for that.
I'm super excited. And the voice of Cassandra, like as we were listening to like the gameplay trailer at E3, we're sitting there and we're like, that sounded like Claudia Black. Is it Claudia Black? And we tried to Google it and there's like 0 information about the voice actors. So that's yet to be confirmed.
We do like to play.
There are moments where we're like, I'm pretty sure that's Claudia Black. And in case you don't know who she is, she voiced Morrigan in Dragon Age. She is also in Uncharted, Lost Legacy, as well as Uncharted 2 as Chloe. So, among many other things. But yes, we were super excited. We're like, oh, I hope it's her. 'Cause she's amazing.
So that's what Ubisoft had to offer.
Mm-hmm. Not a bad haul.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. They have a lot of good franchises under their umbrella, but they also did show quite a few new games as well, which is always nice.
Absolutely. Share the love. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaming Lovers.
So next up, Sony and their circus tent.
No, not circus tent. They quite very blatantly said church tent.
Oh.
Yes.
There's
a couple of church jokes made at the very beginning before they cut to the world's longest banjo live performance. Oh my goodness.
Well, hang on a second. Before we get to the banjo performance, because there will be stuff to talk about there, they had people in a long but narrow building, terrible audio quality.
Yep.
Shaky cameras.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, man, the Microsoft presentation was slick, high tech, and smooth as butter. And I thought, if this is what Sony are showing us, originally I thought I'd pulled up the wrong video. I thought this can't be their E3 conference because this is chump.
Yeah, it had us going, what are they doing? Like, this is really strange. This felt more like an indie developer kind of style rather than a big, AAA game studios. Like, it was just very strange, but it did make sense eventually.
Literally, it felt like we couldn't afford the big hall, so we've set up a tent outside E3. Please come see us.
There was a moment when I finally triggered. I'm like, hang on, I don't think they're staying in this location, because being a big theme park fan that I am, I know the signs when I see a room. When you're moving from one soundstage to another, when they have you watch one thing and then you've got these giant doors and they herd you through to the next one so you can go to the next section. And I recognize, I'm like, that's the layout of this place. That's what it looks like. So I feel like they're going to be moving to different sound stages maybe, and have each game they move to a different thing. And so that's what I kept in the back of my mind just in case. So
out came the banjologist. The banjo player.
Yeah.
Who I thought, okay, I see where this is going. And sure enough,
We thought it was going to tie in, like, he'd play it and then, like, dialogue from the first trailer would start and it would, like, the live banjo playing would kind of go over that. But it did not. And that went on for way too long and it felt like whatever he was playing was very repetitive.
Well, he was playing the theme from The Last of Us.
But they could have shortened it down.
And unlike where Grant Kirkhope conducted the music for the orchestra that was playing while the trailer was playing as well, he was just playing his banjo. And I think he went about 4 minutes too long because it just kept going. And I thought, okay, he's winding down and trailer's going to start and he's probably going to play over it. That's what I thought. Nope. He's winding up again, and we still have no trailer. And
and there was a lot of uncomfortable shuffling of people that were just getting impatient.
You can see in the crowd, they started off, their phones were all up recording him, and then
then everyone's arms
forward.
are like get tired from fatigue, going, this has gone way too long.
Well, not only that, everyone had stopped filming and they were just on their phones, which is always a bad sign that you've lost the crowd.
Yeah.
Then they played the trailer that probably should have been playing during the banjo playing.
It should have.
For The Last of Us.
Part 2. And it cuts to a shot where the roof is identical to the roof that they've got the conference in, where it looks like a church tent / barn covered with twinkle lights that are set up the exact same way as they are in the room where everyone's been kind of squished in like sardines for this conference.
Yeah, and you just
So
hear
everyone's like, finally, I understand why you've put us in this room.
This uncomfortable, shabby room that feels like it's out of an apocalyptic game.
Yes.
Oh, it is. That's
we get
why.
it now. We understand.
So we saw a grown-up Ellie.
Yes.
Years have passed since the first game. And we saw some grisly violence.
Oh my goodness. I had a couple of moments where I'm like, I can't watch this. Like, this is physically hurting me to see a guy get disemboweled. Oh, there was innards. And they became outeds.
The innards did not stay innards for long.
No. It was uncomfortable to watch. But I think that was the point. One of the developers, I think, tweeted or made a comment that...
Yeah, Neil Drummond, the creative head of the game, said that it was designed to be repulsive.
Yes.
And do you think he succeeded?
Yeah, very much.
The machete halfway through
almost
the neck?
a little too well. Don't
okay.
remind me of that. See, that's the thing where I can handle violence to a certain extent. I'm not a big fan of gore and horror, hence why I don't play certain genres, just because it's too much, or watch certain shows. And unfortunately, The Last of Us, I think it's hit a threshold for me where I'm like, I'm not sure if I can play because I can't. I'll have to close my eyes and then I will die because I'm not watching what I'm playing.
Did that happen to you in Heavy Rain?
Yes.
Where there was a little bit of amputation happening and you attempted to do the button input without looking and actually failed because a second one showed up and you then
did more damage.
Had your character in even more pain and disfigured.
Yeah, see, that's where
no
I'm
one
like,
to blame but yourself.
I get that they want to be realistic and that they want to drive home that the horror of it and such, but if it kind of hits, there's a line, and if it gets past that for me, that means I just can't enjoy the game anymore, and it's hard for me to even play. So it's one of those things I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to handle this.
I've always said it. I'm fine with a TV show, a game, a movie having violence or language to a degree. If it fits the setting and it's for a narrative purpose, that's fine. But there is a line, I think, and if you do go too far, it's just either for controversy's sake or just to push the boundary beyond what anyone else is pushed that far and say, hey, look what we're leading. We're the leading violent game out there. Things like that. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can tell a good story without violence, without language, without sexual content, if you do it right.
Absolutely.
And it can be more impactful that way. I don't know if I'm just getting old, but there was an awful lot of violence at this E3.
But, yeah. I mean, you understand the context and that she's fighting for her life, and that when people are fighting like that and in that kind of environment, it's not pretty. And that's a fact of life in general. But for me, I guess because I love to play video games more as an escapism and for fun, and if it gets a little too heavy for me, or a little too like literally makes my stomach curl, then it stops being fun and I have to turn it off. So I'm a little. I sound so sooky.
That's fine. We have different tastes in gaming.
I still love these characters. I think Joel and Ellie are such incredible characters and so well acted as well. Like I want to watch and I want to play. I'm too worried.
You want the censored version.
I wish there was. Honestly, I wish there was like a kid-friendly version almost, just so I could enjoy it without being scarred for life. Because I do tend to get a little freaked out with certain games. Like after playing Heavy Rain, I had lights on all the time because I was scared I was going to get my throat slit by a ninja.
I love how you call them ninjas, even though they were thieves breaking into a house.
They were ninja-like.
Pretty sure there was no ninjas in
That's just how I
Heavy Rain.
remember them. Goodness. Speaking of gory violence, God of War will have New Game Plus.
Well, yeah, it's a segue, I suppose. They are looking to introduce a New Game Plus into the game, which sometimes it is easy as pie, and sometimes you have to sort of rebalance some parts of the game to include your previous powers or your previous skill points or your equipment to make sure the game isn't too easy or too ridiculously off the scale.
Yeah. Then they showcased a few things on VR, like Ghost Giant and Beat Saber.
They sound like such VR titles, don't they?
I know, right? And then Tetris Effect VR mode. Playing Tetris with virtual reality.
My goodness me.
I don't know, but why? But also, how?
That could be terrifying if you feel like a giant Tetris block's going to come down and crush you.
No. Oh, no.
No, don't.
Oh, no. No. Oh,
it's a spoiler.
That is, but that's making me super sad.
Jem's played a game where that actually happened to a character. I won't say which game and I won't say which character because it's spoilers, but I'm sorry I brought that up. It's very insensitive of me.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, move on to Destiny 2 business.
Forsaken?
Yeah. You have no idea.
I didn't touch the first one. I really didn't. I'm like, there was so much. It was one of those games where it just copped so much backlash, like almost immediately after launch. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, all we saw from the trailer presented was just like many games, it's just getting an enhanced expansion, new content being added to an existing game, not a new sequel revealed, just an addition. Probably more of the same for those Destiny 2 fans out there.
Then we got another live performance.
Oh, surely this one was shorter and more to the point than...
This one at least felt a little more on point than the first. This was like a bamboo flute live performance, and it copped a lot of flack online, ironically from white people complaining that a white guy was playing, this instrument instead of an Asian, was what they were complaining about. In
historical Asian garb.
Yes.
Playing a bamboo flute.
Yes. And they're like, how dare you? Why would not get someone authentic? Was basically the wording and the feeling on social media. And then someone did some research over like in Japan to see if anyone from Japan was upset about a white guy playing the bamboo flute. And it was like radio silence. They didn't care at all.
Well, I don't know how many bamboo flautists there are of Asian descent in the Los Angeles area that they could get on such short notice.
Well, it's not so much that too, but you choose someone because they're a good performer and they can play the music, not because of their race. Like, it was an interesting argument to see. It's just this day and age of people getting so upset over the silliest things.
Well, that was an introduction into the new Sucker Punch game, Ghost of Tsushima.
Mm-hmm. And that looks really interesting.
The first of what will be many samurai games that we saw.
Yes, and this one, historically accurate too, talking about the Mongolians as they were just slaughtering the world. Mm-hmm. And then finally reaching Japan and coming up with a bit of a snag.
Having a few issues crossing the seas.
Yes, coming across the kamikaze.
And one thing that definitely caught your eye in this was the mud.
Yes.
In the trailer.
It was super muddy, and the squelching sounds were like really realistic, and it would make their clothes get all muddy and stuff like that. I love things like that, like when they walk through water or mud or anything that it affects their clothes, that it doesn't just disappear, or that their clothing is magically repellent of all the environment around them. I love it.
I just remember playing Uncharted 1.
Yes.
And he hopped in the water and he popped out and his shirt was darker. And I went, ah, that's incredible.
I love that. Just a little attention to detail. I love it. So things like that always stick out to me. And I thought it was just beautiful because it was autumn and so all the leaves are like floating down. And yeah, I'm like, oh, it's just so pretty.
We also had a game coming out from one of my favourite developers that sort of sneak under the radar a bit.
Yep.
Remedy Entertainment. They've done Max Payne.
Max Payne.
Alan Wake.
Max Payne.
Well, that's an in-joke. You can't say that in the podcast. They did Max Payne, they did Alan Wake, they did Quantum Break.
Ah.
And now they have a new game that revealed at the Sony press conference called Control.
And they didn't go into too much detail about what was in that game. So.
Another one of those sort of cryptic reveal trailers. You see glimpses of what looks like futuristic setting, and that's about all you really get.
Yep.
And I'm sure it will... They've had a pretty good track record.
Yep. And that's what I like. Sometimes I like trailers that are just teaser trailers. I wish more movies did this, where it was just teasing it and it doesn't give you the whole plot and sometimes the spoiler for the ending in the trailer. Like, that really ticks me off. So I much prefer teaser trailers. And with video games, especially if they're showing gameplay, I like it if they show gameplay that's also not going to spoil the story, if there is one.
Mm-hmm. Well, at E3, you either get a more in-depth look at a game that has already been revealed, or you get the tease of, hey, this is coming soon.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near done, but we're making it.
Get hyped for it. One game that I think the trailer had all of us a little confused at first because we weren't sure. It was in this first-person point of view, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And it was scampering around like a kitchen, and it kept kind of trying to dodge things. And we're like, oh, it must be a mouse or something. Mm-hmm. And it took like a minute into this, and still we couldn't figure out what game this was.
You hear yelling, you hear some scuffling, a bit of brawling going on.
And then finally...
the shelf falls over. Poor mousey, poor rat
crushed.
gets squished. And
you're like, no. And then they show you this poor dead rat too, and all of its crushed glory. I'm like, gee, thanks, guys.
And I'm sitting there going, I have no idea what this is. The Adventures of Rat? It's over. What happened to poor Rat? And then we see a zombie. And we also see a Raccoon City Police Department uniform.
Mm-hmm. And the crowd goes wild!
Resident Evil 2 remake is coming. Probably one of the most clamoured for remakes apart from Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil 2. Because they remade Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 0 a couple generations ago, admittedly.
Yeah.
But they were great entries. And so people obviously wanted them to continue doing that. We want Resident Evil 2 remade.
We want more Jill sandwiches.
When I say we, I mean me. I'm very excited because the articles I've read from people at E3 who have played the demo say that they almost pooped their pants. Mm-hmm. It had tension, action, characters that were just, oh, hi, I'm a dude. I have a keycard for you. And then you come back and he's dead. Now have fully proper arcs in the narrative. Mm-hmm. The Raccoon City Police Department's probably one of my favourite video game environments ever. I'm getting into that excited mode again, aren't I?
Yes.
This is a game that I am going to snag day one.
In January next year is when it launches, so...
January, February next year is very busy.
Yes.
There were so many games that were saying, hey, guess when we're coming out? It's
now.
First quarter next year.
There were a couple of games that were like, and it's out now. And you're like, yes!
There were. And then we cut to a cartoon man in a bath.
Trover saves the universe.
Yep, one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty behind it.
Yep, not Dan Harmon.
It's Justin Roiland.
So that looks interesting.
It looks weird.
Yes, he got electrocuted by his TV, which we were just sitting there watching this going, yeah, that's going to fall because it's sitting on a lopsided pile of books. That's so dangerous. Although it was kind of making fun of YouTubers
Yeah, hey, I'm here watching my TV. I'm the bathtub guy. How you doing? That sort of business. It's a platformer that appears to be fully playable in PlayStation normally and PlayStation VR. It always confuses me when games that aren't naturally a first-person viewpoint have VR releases. How is that going to work?
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
We'll find out, I guess. Another Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer, and because this was PlayStation, they also have a special console, which I really want.
Man.
It looks so pretty.
Special edition consoles are always in that sweet spot of me going, I have something that functions just like this. I have no need for another PlayStation 4, but dang, I want it.
Yes, and the only time I think we've given into it is when we got our Xbox 360 Star Wars console. I love that thing so much. I love every time I turn it on, which I still use it to this day. And you have R2D2 doing the...
To be
and
fair,
it just makes me so happy.
we got that because it had an upgrade and it
True.
had the ability to use HDMI instead of
Yes.
component video. So there was a reason.
And there was
to
a
get
lot more
new console.
storage on it. We had run out of storage space on our old Xbox 360 too. But that being said, our PlayStation 4, we got very early on its release, so that
Well, maybe
could
we
be
are
due.
due for an upgrade. Another gut punch to Microsoft. Hey, you can have the Kingdom Hearts franchise for Kingdom Hearts 3, but we're releasing a Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD remix, 2.5 HD remix, 2.8 final chapter prologue X2 blurg, and Kingdom Hearts 3 all in one package. Whoa.
Yes,
Like
so if you've
10
not played
games.
the others, you can catch up on them and only have to buy one thing. So that's
And
really
that's
good.
all you'll have to play for the rest of the year. Because you'll have 10 Kingdom Hearts games to play.
But it'd be so good. And that's one of those series we would recommend to a lot of parents for kids because it's got so many Disney characters and Disney worlds in it. It's a little bit harder than like your basic kiddie games. So it's a good kind of jump and a great way to introduce them to platform gaming and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. They have succeeded in later games to find the balance better. Kingdom Hearts is always too hard for kids and too cutesy for adults.
Yeah,
And I don't even know how it found the success that it did, really.
It's got a bit of a niche market, but if you look at adults like us who love Disney and also love anime, and it kind of really hits that sweet spot for us.
Yeah, and it also has the extra Final Fantasy characters. It's got optional bosses that are super tough, things like that.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm excited for Kingdom Hearts 3. Guess when that comes out? First quarter next year.
As does pretty much everything else. Then we finally got to see a longer trailer and some gameplay from Death Stranding.
Does it make sense now?
No, it doesn't. I'm still as confused as ever. I'm
Camera
like,
looked like it
what?
went into a belly button
We
and
have
there
to
was
see
a
the
baby's
baby's
butt
butt.
there and in the womb, then it popped around and swam just
Gave
like a
little,
free swimming dude.
Was it
and
a
went,
thumbs
"What's
up?
I don't know. Freaking weird.
But, I mean, I'm hoping it'll all make sense, obviously, when you get to play it.
And then we saw Norman Reedus as a character, I believe his name was Sam.
Yep.
Just wandering around with his enormous pack mule stuff on his back and his funky little fetus in a tube on his chest.
Wasn't there a meme going around after that trailer of someone had like photoshopped it so that way it had like Uber Eats?
Yeah, like he's bringing
He's
your
delivering
food
your
to
food. But it does look really interesting because there's obviously these invisible creatures that he can sense but he can't see. And so you see like these giant handprints like go past him and he's holding his breath. And then this other chick just materializes next to him and does a shh. And it gives him something, this weird little radar thing that kind of helps him sort of see these shadow things.
Is it him? Is it the robot? Or is it the fetus baby that can sense them?
I don't
don't
know,
know.
because he kind of, in order to make that radar thing work, he had to get the fetus awake. Like, this is what I'm gathering from the trailer and the gameplay, right? Like, this is all very speculative. It's very much like, I'm guessing that this is how it's working.
All right, suddenly Kingdom Hearts doesn't sound so complicated.
No. But yeah, it looks strange. And then they showed all these characters, but they didn't give any like clarification as to why, like, or who they are or why it's so important that they suddenly show up. They're like, oh, you're here. And it's like, well, cool, but who are you?
We
Like,
have
I don't
no
understand why it's such a big deal that you've just suddenly shown up out of nowhere.
No idea what's happened to the rest of humanity,
No.
what these things are,
So
why
strange.
Hideo Kojima has a life-size wax doll of Norman Reedus dressed up.
We took that to E3, I think, for the floor. And he can wear the clothes because he showed another picture on his Twitter account of him wearing the
Kojima
outfit.
rocking the outfit.
Yeah, making sure it fit. So
The
yeah,
world is his playground, isn't it?
it really is. But it's one of those games where, like, obviously we'll be playing it when it comes out and hopefully we'll get some answers. A lot of intrigue, that's for sure. It's got us talking and it's got everyone talking and questioning and speculating. So that's not a bad thing at all.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you need more samurais in your life? Because I got
Always.
more samurais for you. Sequel to a game that's still on my backlog. I'll be playing it soon. And when I say that, it'll probably be in the next 3 years at some point. Neo.
Yeah.
Sort of a more fantasy-based...
Neo.
Neo. Neo 2 announced.
Mm-hmm.
More fantasy-based. Japanese folklore, yokai,
Yep.
that sort of stuff.
But not as cutesy. A bit
No,
more
not
scary.
yokai watch yokai. Completely different yokai.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think of the little glimpse we saw of that? It wasn't much.
It was very quick. To be fair, I haven't seen even much of the first one, so it's hard for me to say. And I know you're excited for it, but it's not really been on my radar. So I'm like, okay, cool, and on to the next. One game that a lot of people that have had the chance to actually get their hands and play on the E3 floor have been talking about is the new Spider-Man game.
Oh snap! I love Spider-Man.
Yes, and that's another one I'm excited for purely because I believe Spider-Man this time around is being voiced by Yuri, who voices Yosuke in Persona 4.
I love how you're on a first name basis with him.
But I know it's funny because there's a character. Was she a reporter? She was in the helicopter.
And what was her name?
And he yells at Yuri, and we're like, he's yelling at his own name. It was just a really funny meta moment. I just started giggling, but that looked really good. It looked a lot like the Batman Arkham Asylum kind of combat and style, really fluid, and obviously a lot of cheeky dialogue coming from Spider-Man because, of course, he has to talk smack. While he's fighting them.
That's why we love Spider-Man. He's always got a one-liner.
Yes. So I'm really looking forward to that. That looks good.
A lot of classic villains that have a lot of their comic book designs from the old days.
There's a couple in there I'm like, wait, who's that? I'm not entirely sure who that is. Like, there's still, like, I'm familiar with some of them, but I'm like going, man, I need to go back and see.
Yeah, most of your Spider-Man knowledge comes from current movies? Would that pretty much
entirely.
be it?
I actually knew, I would dare say I knew more about Spider-Man than most casual fans because I knew that Mary Jane was not the original girlfriend. So in the early Tobey Maguire movies, I'm like, no, there's Gwen and then she dies and then there's Mary Jane.
My
You
gosh,
got it
you are
wrong.
just dropping spoilers.
Oh, no, it's in the comic books. I'm just quoting what was in what I knew anyway.
Well,
So-
I had collectible cards where I got most of my Spider-Man knowledge from. I got the occasional comic book. I had a Revenge of the Sinister Six video game on the Sega Master System. So I loved all that Spider-Man stuff years ago.
Spider-Man's your number one, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
The problem is with Spider-Man, and so many other comic book and superhero things, there's that many different series of it.
Yeah.
You got the Amazing Spider-Man, the Spectacular Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099. You got all these different Spider-Man universes. It's like, which one's real? But if you just take each media entity as its own universe,
Yep.
like the Tobey Maguire movies obviously aren't the same as the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man things. So you just got to take this game as its own thing and not try to say, oh, they're doing that wrong. Those characters never met. This is the wrong thing.
It's its own canon in its own little bubble. Yeah.
dig it.
Otherwise, you're going to get upset with everything because you'll have an expectation and it's not going to be met. So you're just setting yourself up for a fall that way.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. Want to join the conversation? Visit thegaminglovers.com. Record your comment or question by clicking on the button on the right-hand side. And you could be featured in the next podcast.
G'day, this is the Gaming Lovers with Brendo and Jem. We are talking about E3 in this bonus episode, covering all the gaming news and awkward moments of the past week. There is so much to recap. We've talked about most of the major developers and studios, conferences and the news that they have dropped. One that we haven't touched on yet is Square Enix.
Well, Square Enix had the disadvantage that two of their major releases, which was Kingdom Hearts 3 and Just Cause 4, were already revealed about 6 times before we actually got to their presentation.
Wasn't Just Cause 4 leaked? Was it by Walmart?
Yeah, accidentally.
In
Just ahead
Canada.
of time.
Good job, guys. Oh, that's so funny. I believe they had a pre-order page come up on their website or something like that, and that's how it got leaked. Super.
But when that happens, the anticipation of what are they going to reveal? Oh, it's Just Cause 4 again. Never mind, I can sit on my hands for the next 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, what's next? Oh, it's Kingdom Hearts 3. We've already seen this.
Yes. And
Can we get something that we haven't quite
Kingdom
seen
Hearts was done a little bit to death over E3 because it felt like at every conference, at least, they showed a trailer for it. And so after a while, unless you're seeing brand new footage or different gameplay, you're like, nah, we've seen this, tuning out. And so they had that problem a little bit, unfortunately.
Well, that set them back a little bit, but they did have some good reveals. They had some existing things that we already knew were in the works. Shadow of the Tomb Raider got a bit of time to show its gameplay.
Yes.
How things work.
Yes.
How the AI is still just as... Oh,
Savage?
what's that sound? I'll go and see what's over there by myself.
Yes. Lara Croft is back. She's learnt a little bit from her past adventures, but still it's kind of like her against the world a little bit, always outgunned. And fighting eels? Was that an eel underwater?
Oh my gosh, those giant eels. If there's any creature that will make me get the heebie-jeebies.
Those are the shrieking eels.
I'll be doing the shrieking if that giant eel wraps itself around Lara while I'm underwater and drowns her.
That's a Princess Bride reference, by the way, for those who have not seen the greatest movie in the entire world. There you go. So I know my sister Natalie is going to be very excited. She loves the Tomb Raider series. Not exactly a fan of seeing poor Lara get impaled over and over again.
Yeah, I got a reminder of that with there was a gif going around of Conan O'Brien.
Oh, was
and
he
his
playing
reaction when she was sliding down the waterfall and suddenly got a sharp stick through the chin and out the top of the head.
Oh.
And his face was like, oh my gosh.
Yes. That's on his Clueless Gamer segment, which is so funny. It's kind of refreshing actually to see because obviously he's not a big gamer, but his friend is. And so you see this guy who just loves games trying to explain these games to someone that just has no interest in being taught.
Yes.
Which is so familiar, I think, for us when we introduce a game we love to our friends and they're like, this is stupid. And they kind of give up in the first few minutes and you're like,
it does break my heart more often than not. I mean, there's some funny moments, but it's also like, no, you don't understand. No, you're not getting it.
You're missing the point. There was also, for Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood, some more additional content.
Yes,
that
and
was
not
getting
only
added.
that, a crossover event with Monster Hunter World.
Interesting choice.
Two of their franchises crossing over. There's been some good video game crossovers in the past. Maybe we can talk about that one day.
Maybe. But the interesting and slightly sad point is that was the only Final Fantasy news. We had the entire conference for Square Enix.
I'm a bit miffed.
I think a lot of fans are a bit miffed.
Last year's E3,
Yeah.
they revealed the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah.
And now we're all quiet.
Yes, I wonder why that is. Probably because it's not going according to plan or things are behind schedule or they're a bit worried. So they decided just to not say anything. And fans were very vocal with their displeasure about it not being featured or even mentioned just, hey, we're working on it. We don't have anything to show you, but we were working on it. They didn't even say anything.
Something with a game that big, you could show just a little
You could show a logo.
30-second snippet of just what one of the areas looks like in the new engine.
Or concept art, anything to prove that you have been working on it, and fans would be okay with it. They would accept it and be like, cool, I know it's in the works.
I'm so worried. I just feel that project has been snake bit from the get-go,
It's
and
gonna
it's just
turn
not
into-
going to go well.
It's going to turn into Half-Life 3 at this stage. It's never
Hey,
going
at
to...
least this is being made.
Well, it could be one of those games that starts being made and then just doesn't.
You know what this Square Enix presentation needs? Another game that we've already seen revealed at a previous conference.
Oh, yes.
That'll help them, I reckon.
Exactly. Yes, but it was slightly different at least this time because we had the creators of Life is Strange 2 talk about the game Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit and how it's definitely not Life is Strange 2. They made that very clear that it wasn't a sequel, but that it was still in the same universe. I think it's a prequel.
It might even lead into
Yeah.
the events of Life is Strange Season 2 episode. No, not episode 2. I guess it would be Season 2.
Season 2, yeah. But the cool thing was that they said it would be completely free, which is awesome because normally they might release like the first episode in a thing for free, although we don't know how long this is. It might be
This
only
could be
2
a
hours.
one-shot.
Yeah. Or it could be a couple of episodes, but whatever it is, it's all free. So that's definitely one to watch out for.
I'll definitely download that and probably play it 4 months after it releases, the rate that I go.
Dragon Quest XI also got announced at Square Enix.
Dragon Quest is one of those series I'm always like, that looks interesting. But because there's so many games in it and I haven't played any of them, it's almost too daunting for me to get into. The art style has always caught my eye because it was the same art director as the Dragon Ball Z animation that I loved as a teenager.
Yeah.
So the characters have the same eyes. And that's how you can know an artist has worked on something, if it's the same eyes. But yeah, that has an entire trailer with all the ins and outs of the Dragon Quest universe.
Then we had Babylon's Fall.
Yes, and another development from Platinum Games, who have been on a hot streak. I first played a Platinum game with Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, super fast action. They had sort of developed from the Devil May Cry gameplay.
Yep.
And it was just fast-paced action, and then they made Bayonetta, and they made Nier Automata, and this is what they're working on as well. So it looks like it should be right in their wheelhouse.
Octopath Traveler was another one that was announced, and it looked very much like your typical like anime art style, very Square Enix-ish. It's hard to say that, but unless you're very familiar with that kind of art style, it just kind of immediately screams JRPG kind of.
I think I heard it called a HD 2D art style, where it is high def, but it is
Still two-dimensional.
pixel 16-bit style graphics. And you've got turn-based combat by the looks of things. You've got numbers of damage popping up above people's heads. 8 characters with different stories that all wind together.
Yep.
Should be interesting.
Absolutely. And beautiful artwork on the case as well. I'm always drawn to those kind of cases just because I love anime so much. I'm like, even if I don't necessarily want to play the game, I'm like, oh, it's so pretty.
So it's fine for you to do that with covers, but if I have that opinion on the art in guidebooks, suddenly it's an issue?
You can look at it, but they're just so expensive.
Not with it.
I'm not buying the games, I'm just
$2.
looking at them in the shop. The one that got leaked by Walmart, Just Cause 4, which is always a sandbox full of fun and silliness and sort of not as far as Saints Row in its ridiculousness, but it feels like it's getting there.
Rocket boosters, grappling hooks.
Yeah, and tornadoes this time around.
Don't forget the tornadoes.
How could you forget? They've added in wild weather to the game, so at any moment you could be facing a giant tornado or twister coming through, or you could have a hurricane. There's a lot of different things that they have set that will just happen throughout the game to make gameplay more interesting. So,
and boy, nothing makes gameplay more interesting than winds at 190 kilometers an hour just tearing through
just
the
parachuting through a tornado.
Doesn't seem safe.
Doesn't seem like
Doesn't
a wise
seem
choice
safe.
at all. Ugh. A really short trailer popped up at Square Enix for a game called The Quiet Man, which looked really interesting.
It's like looked like just hand-to-hand combat. That's all we really saw. But the catch is, I think the player you play as is hearing impaired in some degree. So we haven't really had a game with that sort of mechanic behind it where your character can't hear. Again, I love seeing new games, new new ideas just being explored with these sort of dynamics and mechanics. We don't know much about it, except you're punching guys in an alleyway and you can't hear that well.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like my Saturday nights.
You got that ringing in your ears. Then to wrap up the Square Enix conference was, of course, Kingdom Hearts 3.
Oh,
and by that point, we had seen everything, and I think a lot of people had started checking out mentally. They're like, okay, cool, we've seen this, bye-bye.
More importantly, we'd heard that same song
Again
3
and again.
or 4 times as well, which doesn't help.
And it's one of those jarring songs that doesn't fit the action that's on screen. It's a pretty song, but it just doesn't suit what it's showing.
It's very Kingdom Hearts. I'm pretty sure it's the same performer.
Yeah.
But when you hear a song that many times, and you've seen a trailer that many times, and you just want something new, you want that Final Fantasy VII remake footage to hit the home run at the end. And
They could have shown some more
doesn't happen.
gameplay or a new story section, and they didn't. They just replayed an old one, and we're like, oh, come on, guys. And an interesting thing to note was that the whole conference, rather than having a representative from Square Enix, like, you know how they usually have like the CEOs or someone that's a top dog come and kind of speak in between bits.
Mhm.
This time they had Keith David narrating everything, who for me will always be Captain Anderson,
From,
Mass Effect.
there it is. And for me, he will always be Keith David, as Keith David in Saints Row 4.
But he does make a few video game appearances.
He voiced the Arbiter in Halo 2.
Yep.
He's no stranger to that media.
And then in Community, he was the narrator in like the episode that's like making fun of war documentaries. But then he shows up as a character like in one of the later seasons, which I just found really funny. Anyway, enough on Keith David's filmography and gameography. Gameography? What is it?
Yeah, it's a gameography.
Share the love. Follow us on Twitter at Brendo Jem. That's BRENDOJEM.
And how could we forget Nintendo? They always do their pre-recorded, usually, little conferences.
Don't have an actual live conference.
They don't have a big
theatre,
stage. Yeah.
A theatre. But they still have quite a few little reveals here and there.
This year was really different, though. They did some live bits where they had executives and developers and such from Nintendo speak and have it live translated. But I feel like it was being broadcast almost like a news journalist from Japan.
Yeah.
And the feeling, though, because normally Nintendo, when they pre-record stuff, do really cutesy things, and that's what we always look forward to, is like they have like puppets or other stuff that just makes us go, oh, that's so cool. But this year was a really different feeling.
It felt very straight-laced.
Yeah.
No frills.
No,
This
which is very not Nintendo to me anyway.
Here's our game.
Yeah,
Here's the
this is
next
this.
game.
Very solemn.
It was a bit strange. Very, very sharp turn from what they've done in the past.
I know, and so I think that was a little jarring for me watching this, and because we actually stayed up for that one and live tweeted, and I think I was a little delirious by the end of that
at 2 in the
conference
morning.
too. Yes, trying to keep up on Twitter, trying to write and watch at the same time was not working well for me. There's probably some spelling mistakes in there.
Doesn't matter. What did you see that caught your eye on that Nintendo presentation?
Super Mario Party. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for that. Especially because it looks like you can combine, like if you have a Switch and your friend has a Switch, it looks like you can combine it, and I don't know how that works. Like they didn't really explain, they just showed the trailer, but I'm like, I want to play it. I love Mario Party, and yes.
I'm just happy it looks like they've gone back to individual dice rolls instead of what they did in the last couple games where you all hop on a car and you all move together.
Yeah.
That's not as fun. There's less strategy. You can't split up. You can't send, I'm going to go this way because he's already going to get the star. I'm hoping it goes this way. It might work. It might not work. I don't know. I'm just a gambler.
But that's the point of board games and stuff. So yeah, I'm excited for it, and some of those mini games looked hilarious, like the little trikes. And you see them like wiggling the Joy-Cons as hard as they can, and they're like barely moving.
I'm just happy that Goomba is a playable character. You can play as the humble Goomba.
Or Bowser. Which
Bowser has
normally he's
joined
the
the team.
antagonist. Like, he's the one who's slowing you down throughout the game.
Mhm.
So for him to be a character, I'm like, cool.
He's had enough. He's like, no, you guys, actually, it looks fun. I want to play.
I want to play. Let me play.
We saw some new DLC coming out for Xenoblade Chronicles 2,
Yes.
which if you were watching live on Twitch and had subtitles on, it said speaks language other than English, which I found hilarious.
I think that's been making the rounds with memes. So funny.
Mm-hmm.
Then Fire Emblem. A game that I am sorely behind in. I have them. I have not played them all. I need to go back to the start and just replay through the whole series, but I am super excited. Fire Emblem Three Houses has been announced coming in spring 2019, which might mean autumn for us in Australia. Because when they do the announce dates, it's usually opposite seasons.
Yeah, it always makes it tricky.
Yes.
There was a game called Hollow Knight, which has been out on other consoles, and this is what happens with Nintendo sometimes, especially because their console is relatively new.
Yes.
They get a lot of their games that have already been released, but hey, it's coming to Switch. Fortnite's coming to Switch. Hollow Knight coming to Switch. If it has Knight in the title, it's probably coming to Switch. Shovel Knight is already on the Switch, so that actually lines up.
Then the piece de resistance.
It was
The
a big
thing-
piece
Yeah,
of resistance.
It was almost the whole piece. They probably could have done just a whole thing on this. It was the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where every playable character from all the previous games are back, baby.
Wow.
I'm excited. But honestly, it doesn't really matter because I always play as Kirby.
And the most important reveal was that you can still use GameCube controls
Yes.
with the Switch.
Though, with the Switch having the Pro controller that came out when they launched Switch, and not just the Joy-Cons, I don't think it'll be as big as an issue anymore because the reason everyone liked using the GameCube controllers was because the Wii remote sucked. And they didn't feel as comfortable, especially for a long time, especially playing a game like a fighting game like that. Whereas with the Pro controllers that came out with the Switch, I think that they would be okay. Like they sit comfortably in your hand, I think you could play fine with those.
While still, a lot of gamers have that legacy. They played Super Smash Bros. Melee on the GameCube. They played
one of them.
Brawl on the Wii with the GameCube controllers.
same.
They played Smash Bros. Wii U with the GameCube controllers.
Yeah.
It is the preferred controller for that game.
Yeah.
It is compatible with the Switch, and that is pretty awesome. And hey, they didn't want to reveal too much as far as new characters, but guess who has finally arrived?
Daisy!
Yes, as an Echo character, which is basically a clone of Peach.
And Inkling!
Inkling!
From Splatoon.
You
The
have an
closest I will get to play because it's always online and we've refused to play because I wanted to have local multiplayer and they said no. So Jem said no. And then they introduced
Ridley!
Ridley Scott.
No, not Ridley Scott. He didn't murder Samus's parents. I don't believe so.
No, he just created, lots of movies.
Okay, but Ridley has been requested for a long time. The developer said no, he's too large. So they shrank him down and he looks a little weird, standing at about 6 foot tall.
He does. But, oh my goodness, people went nuts when Ridley got announced.
Here's a lovely PG trailer, and we're going to show your heroes like Mario being impaled on Ridley's tail. Excellent. What more could you ask
There was
for?
not long after that announcement, like a meme, I think a comic that someone drew of Samus looking very angry across the table at Ridley and refusing to accept that Ridley was now part of the team, and all of the other characters are trying to placate her and say, look, it's okay, we've made peace with our mortal enemies that are in this game, it'll be okay. And she's refusing to accept it. So I love things like that. The internet, when it does things like that, is just awesome.
Well, you did mention the Inklings before. Splatoon 2 gets an Octo expansion, which was originally
With
slated.
Octodad. No,
No, not Octodad.
that would be a fun crossover, just saying.
Well,
Nintendo.
nobody would suspect a thing. But they originally announced this wasn't coming until July. And guess what? It's out. Not today, but tomorrow is what they said. So
So it's out now.
it would be. By the time you hear this, it should be out.
Yep. And of course, there's always more amiibos. Where there are
Yes.
new games, there are new amiibos. Ooh, that was an interesting thing that they touched on with Smash Bros.
Mm-hmm.
All previous amiibos will work.
If the character, doesn't matter if it's a Smash Brothers amiibo or not, if you have an amiibo of a character that is in Smash Brothers, it will work.
That's so cool. So that's nice. I kind of like that because I get a little annoyed at companies that say, no, you need to get the most recent one, otherwise it doesn't work, because that feels very like, give us more money. So that's
maybe
good
a
on them.
Snake amiibo?
Ooh, in a cardboard box with his little head sticking out. I would love it if he looked like a chibi version of that. Would be super cute.
So, conspicuous by its absence, no news on a new Metroid Prime, which they said is being in development, but they didn't show anything about that. So
No.
maybe they want to keep a couple of tricks up their sleeve.
Some other news coming out of E3, because not every studio could have its own conference. They would just have small things announced and then would be available kind of on the floor.
The show floor, they had live streams. They had, hey, this is our schedule for the next 3 days, and we've got this guest and this game and this thing and that dude, and yeah.
So there was a few different things that caught our attention, that's for sure.
Hey, did you see the trailer for Ooblets?
Ooblets, that's such a funny name.
It looks like a Animal Crossing crossed with a Katamari design art style.
That sounds like fun.
Sounds like I have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's what the trailer showed me.
So that's
looks to be
on
coming on
PC and Xbox.
Yes.
One thing that we've been excited for and waiting for impatiently are the Persona dancing games, which kind of sounds funny. Like, we're so excited for these dancing rhythm games. Woo!
Hey, Persona 4 Dancing All Night was a good time.
Yes, and it actually had story that worked. Like, it's not just for the sake of milking more money. They actually put in decent story and everything else, and we love some of those remixes. We still listen to them in our cars as we drive around. So
Yeah, we're big Persona fans,
Yes.
so really anything Persona based is going to get a bit of a biased affection from us.
absolutely.
But we love rhythm games. We love Persona. Why not enjoy some more of that?
Now, unfortunately, Atlas didn't drop too much other news because they have their own, like once a year, maybe it's even twice a year, they'll have their own little live stream that they do, which is at the weirdest hours that we tend to watch online. And sometimes with some really strange happenings because Japan. And that's when they'll drop all the news and they'll announce their games, and they do it kind of on their terms. So they very rarely announce anything new at E3. It's just usually showing a little bit more of what we already know is coming. So I was hoping there would be some more news, but
I would have
sadly
been
not.
so at home in that Sega area because they had the Atlas, they had the Persona games, they had Yakuza, which has announced that the Yakuza games are coming to PC
August
after
1st.
much noise from the PC community. They're like, hey, we want this game series, please. Can you do
Yes.
something about this? I believe Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami, which is the remake of 1, going to be coming out on PC. And not only Persona, not only Yakuza, but Sonic. I mean, what else could Brendo want except for those 3 pillars of his gaming experiences? Team Sonic Racing, we've seen some footage, we've seen some trailers. Crush 40 doing the music again. That means nothing to you, but it means an awful lot to me. So I'm happy
How long
boy.
has it been since they've had like a Sonic racing game? I feel like was it on the Wii or the Wii U?
Wii U had Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed,
Yes.
and that was also on the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Surprisingly solid, that game. Most people say, oh, it's a kart racer, it's a copy of Mario Kart. Of course it is. But that had tracks that actually transformed mid-race.
Yeah.
So you'd be driving along the first lap, there'd be a bridge. The second lap, a giant dragon smashes through the bridge and suddenly your car becomes a plane.
Yeah.
And you're off in the sky, and then you end up in the water for the third lap. It's pretty great.
You see a lot of games will mimic each other, but they'll innovate and they'll add something better to it. And then so when Mario Kart releases a new thing, they copy what worked out of other things they see, and then they'll add that to their games as well. So they do that all the time. They take what works from another game that's similar and add it, and they keep building upon each other.
Controversial opinion, but I've probably had more fun with non-Mario Kart races in my gaming history than I have
Really?
with the Mario Kart series. Diddy Kong Racing had a single-player story mode. Crash Team Racing, I think, revolutionized the boost mechanic with its sliding, not only with drifting, but also you got boosts off ramps if you jumped to the right time, which was awesome. And Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed rewards skill, not luck, which is why I really enjoyed it. Also had challenge modes, unlockable characters, everything else I could possibly want, and it had Sonic and Danica Patrick, who's a real life person.
But did it have Yoshi? No, it didn't. So I'm sorry.
It had Alex Kidd.
No.
It had BD Joe from Crazy Taxi. What more could you ask for?
A lot more. We're going to get heated. We might save that for another podcast. We'll do Mario versus Sonic.
We'll save that for another chapter. Hey, you know what has chapters? Episodic games. Hey, you know who make episodic games? Telltale.
Yes, they do.
Don't know why I brought that up.
Gee, I wonder.
On an unrelated note, there's going to be a Telltale Stranger Things game.
Interesting.
They have done well with any...
established law.
Yeah, any sort of existing franchise they've been gifted with the ability to make a game out of, they've done pretty well. They've done it with Borderlands, they've done it with Game of Thrones, A Wolf Among Us,
The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead comics. They've done well. They have a track record. And strangely, they're also doing Minecraft story mode on actual Netflix. I think. What?
There's supposed to be 5 episodes that you'll be able to stream. And I don't know how this is going to tie in with gameplay or if it is supposed to tie in at all with gameplay, but that's what has been announced. That is the level Minecraft has hit now in pop culture.
Well, I haven't played the actual Minecraft story mode that Telltales have made, but I suppose if you include the choices, but take out the QuickTime events, you could play it on Netflix.
There's a really unique game that's coming to PC and hopefully consoles that gives you the ability to be a shark and basically become Jaws, and your whole job is to eat humans.
I love nothing more than a goofy game that can keep me entertained for half an hour.
Yep.
With some buddies, have some laughs.
Can be a man-eater.
I mean, just the appeal of seeing a fisherman on a dock and you build up your speed and leap out and chomp him. Knock people out of boats. Here comes a surfer. Chompy chompy. It's one of those games that is entirely based on a single premise. Mm-hmm. You are a shark. You eat people.
Yes.
Enjoy.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of compilation videos of the best and most ridiculous deaths and stuff in that game. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch out for. Fortnite has been making a lot of headlines with the announcement that it's finally on Switch, which people have been playing and streaming already. Mm-hmm. But there's been a bit of backlash because Sony have come out and said, yeah, you can play Fortnite, but you can't cross-play with anyone that's playing on Xbox, PC, mobile, or Switch.
Yeah, they can all play against each other.
Yeah, you can play against people on the PlayStation Network, but nobody else. They're kind of like the really strict parents that no, you can play with friends that we let you play with, but no one else.
Yeah, they have definitely put the brakes on cross-platform play, and I don't see how it rewards them.
No, I feel like that's going to really hurt them. They've made some strange choices. They used to be super friendly in that area. They would be really big on indie games and supporting a lot of that kind of stuff, and now they seem to be pulling back on that for some reason.
Well, think about this scenario. Adam has a PS4, okay? Bert has an Xbox One, and Charlie has a Nintendo Switch.
Yes.
Everyone has Fortnite. Bert and Charlie can play against each other. Mm-hmm. Poor Adam cannot.
Poor Adam left out in the cold.
What's Adam's only choice if he wants to play with his friends?
On his phone.
Get a console other than a Sony PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
All that's doing is pushing gamers away from their own product.
Yeah.
Surely you'd want to bring them into the fold.
Absolutely.
So strange.
Very strange. And I don't know if there's obviously there would be some issues with trying to make sure things connect, not just with your server, but with the servers for the other consoles and stuff. I don't know all the technical ways that makes the game work.
Everyone else has figured it out, though.
Yeah, I guess so. They're
just dragging
being
their
stubborn.
heels. Yep.
Yeah. So that's it for most of the gaming news. One of the last things that we watched for the E3 conferences this year was one of the main events on the show floor where the New Day from WWE took on the Elite from New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yes.
So, oh my goodness, we were watching this really not that long ago because it went live very early this morning, so we caught up on it. And So funny. Some of the smack talk between the two, there was some pretty, like, vicious insults thrown at each other, all in love, but like some of them in love, but some of them cut deep.
Yeah, WWE's The New Day, a 3-man team, Xavier Woods, Big E, Kofi Kingston. Xavier Woods has a YouTube channel, UpUpDownDown, where he gets all of the gaming community and the wrestling community to cross over.
Mm-hmm. And you might know him better as Austin Creed.
It's very successful. It was just something he started to play games on the road and record and his reactions to certain games. And now it is massive.
Yep.
Absolutely massive.
Huge.
The Elite, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson, have their own YouTube series called Being the Elite.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could poke and prod at each other over social media. And Kenny Omega and Austin Creed have quite a history. They have clashed at previous gaming conferences and events.
Yep.
And this was going to be the big decider.
The rubber match.
They had 3-on-3 gaming in Street Fighter V Anniversary Edition. And then we had a big 1-to-5 between Creed and Omega.
Yeah.
And my goodness, you could not have booked it better if it was a wrestling match. That was exciting.
Yes.
You should go out of your way. Even if you're not a fan of professional wrestling, if you love gaming and you want to see some people
play Street Fighter really well.
Yeah, they're good gamers.
Yeah.
They have a little dig at each other here and there, but it was entertaining.
And there was some penalty as well, because it boiled down to a 1-on-1 at the end. After the 3-on-3, there's also a 1-on-1 with Austin versus Kenny. And the penalty was that whoever lost would have to eat these chili peppers.
Mm-hmm.
Some really intense ones. And so that's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, whenever you raise the stakes like that, whenever there's that extra level of, oh my goodness, not only will my pride be damaged, but
so
my
will
insides will be.
So even if you've seen spoilers on social media as well, because obviously it's happened, so the results have been posted on several places. Even WWE's website have posted about this. It's hard to avoid spoilers, but even if you've seen the results, it's still worth watching because it's just so funny. They're very, very entertaining to watch, and it's no secret we're wrestling fans as well as gamers, so for us that was just kind of ticking all our boxes. We're like, yep, this is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
When worlds collide, it's like, you know how the Avengers, they're talking about the greatest crossover in history. For us, we're like, no, this is it. We've been waiting for these guys to collide because it's very rare that WWE will acknowledge any wrestling promotion that isn't theirs.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of pretend that they just don't exist. And that WWE is the only one in the world.
If you're in the lead of any industry, you don't acknowledge that your competitors exist.
Yeah.
If you're behind, that's when you start following.
Especially when your competitors start putting on matches that are much better than yours.
Different?
Ooh,
different industries. Not really. Same industry, but different rules.
Yes, absolutely.
Different health requirements.
And now Jesse's going to start a podcast about wrestling because I really want to talk about some of those incredible matches, but that's not the right podcast. I'll be a guest on someone's podcast. Let me talk about wrestling. Especially after Dominion. Oh my goodness.
Good matches?
So good. So good.
So,
Good, isn't it?
I think I know a guy who likes wrestling. I'm sure he'd wouldn't mind doing a podcast with you.
Bruce Pritchard?
No. He's already got one. You'd have to go join his podcast.
Well, I'd be okay with that, you know.
Well, they unfortunately have no guests needed on that show. So
no, they've got enough star power.
Out of luck there.
So who's the guy that I should do a podcast with, eh?
Oh, it's a secret. If you don't figure it out by now... You want to know who it is?
Chris Jericho.
No.
I got it loud and clear. I need to be on Chris Jericho's podcast.
No.
Talk is Jericho, because obviously he would want to speak to me.
Do you want me to tell you who it is?
Who?
It's me, Jem. It was me all along, Jem.
And all the people that are like gaming fans listening to this podcast that do not like wrestling are like, okay, tuning out now. Maybe one day we might work on a wrestling podcast. We'll see how we go.
Well, this is a bonus episode of the Gaming Lovers podcast, the podcast for gamers by lovers.
And we love games.
And we love games.
Yes. But, someone did ask me recently where we got our name for this podcast, and part of it is tied in with wrestling because of the Golden Lovers, which is Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi,
Right.
a tag team from New Japan, which you already know. You were saying that it's like, it's
see.
the first time you've ever heard it.
Interesting.
That was part of the reason why you liked the name, was because I was like, hey, it kind of sounds like this. And you're like, yes, I love it.
You learn something new every day.
So there you go. That's kind of part of where we got our name from. So a little bit of homage to those guys because they're a great tag team.
That's fascinating.
Thank you. Well, enough of your condescending attitude. We will be back at the regular time. So look out for our next episode, which will drop Tuesday in Australia, Monday in the States, and pretty much the rest of the world.
That's nice to know.
You gotta stop this, my goodness. I'm gonna go kick his butt. Have a wonderful weekend, and
We'll be back in a couple days.
yes, we will. Until then, if you want to see live stream gaming, catch up on past episodes, or check us out on social media, please head to our website, thegaminglovers.com. Bye, Anara.
I think it's time for my oboe solo. Can someone please pass my instruments?
No.
Thanks for listening to the Gaming Lovers podcast. For more episodes or to watch some live stream gaming, visit thegaminglovers.com.